Jason, we all got enemies.
We do have enemies, don't we? Isn't there like a rap song about? It was like NWA. Remember back in the day? That's what I liked about like old school rap. Because we're in the studio of 99.9 The Beat FM, so I encourage people to stream on that. But they play old school hip hop, R&B. We're trying to get them to be a little bit more. What word would we use? Urban. We have to tell Byron.
Yeah.
Us white asses.
Yeah.
Have to turn around and be like, bro, that Journey song or Poison from the 80s.
Yeah, you got to put that on there.
Yeah.
just kind of put it in. Do us a favor.
So we had back in the day, like true gangsters.
They were actual gangsters.
Yeah, like from
rapping.
Yeah, and they would rap about the situations that they had, their hero's journey.
Yeah. Oh, they actually. That's funny. They were.
Yeah, and they're in that format. I mean, they didn't know where they were going. Or
what NWA would talk about the hood. Who was their enemy, right? Yeah. Their enemy was the man.
Yes. Yeah.
And the
police officer.
The physicality of the man, the physical embodiment of the man,
right.
Like people holding them down, was the police. That's what it was.
It's sad. No, I was talking to somebody the other day. It's sad now because most rappers nowadays are from like middle America.
Yeah.
Went to regular schools and all that. So
or you get Eminem.
Like fuck the police. You didn't have those, you don't have those songs anymore.
No, it didn't actually.
They're like complaining about if a girl has a big ass or not.
It's changed. The whole the thematics of it, you know what I mean? The
right.
emotion behind it. Actually, there was more emotion in old school hip hop. It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone, yeah. I mean, because it was like real struggle.
Yeah. It's like they've left the struggle and now they only speak to the ego.
Yeah, exactly. And so the hero's journey, what we talked about last week, and we ended on and I don't want people need to listen to the other one before they go to it. So cut this one off.
Yeah, shut it off.
And go listen to the first one, especially at the end. You talked about a rugby situation that you had.
Yeah.
Not Rigby, but a rugby.
Yeah, not a Rigby, a rugby.
And in this rugby situation, you made the wrong call. You shouldn't have been in rugby. You rip your fucking leg in half.
Yeah.
Basically, it looks like what's the big muscle in your thigh?
The quad.
Your quad looked like a fruit roll up.
It did. It was gross.
It rolled right up, just like.
Yep.
And so you're in the shower, you're crying.
Yeah, and laughing
hysterically at the same time, knowing that you fucked up. And you had this 300-pound enemy that caused this to you because you were in the wrong situation that you put yourself into.
He was the physical embodiment of me being my own worst enemy. It was like me finally coming to a physical terms with myself. And that's what he was. He was nothing more or less than that. He was just, hey, Alex, you're not figuring out these lessons. You've been ignoring them. This is your final calling card. You know what I mean?
So because we got into the first call, the call to adventure, and then we got into the ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal. Then we get into part 2, the supreme ordeal, the initiation.
Right. You're initiated into this darker world, right? You're coming. There's a lot of energy, right? This guy had a lot of weight to him. There's a lot of energy in that situation. So how do I take this thing, this other piece of energy, this form, right, whether it be good or bad, and how do I learn from it? How do I understand that he is also a part of me? He is a physical embodiment of me coming back as reflection, and I've done physical harm to myself.
And so we had the mentor help crossing the threshold.
Yeah.
And we're in this test, allies, enemies. And this is part of the initiation. So that embodiment of that enemy, what is an enemy? When you're going along the hero's journey, you followed your gut, it's not ego, you're moving on the right path.
Right.
And what is a representation of the enemy?
The enemy is the inverse of you and your energies. So it's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. Okay? It's that insurmountable point. It's that person who has the energetic duplicate of you, but in a negative form. That's what the enemy is. Or a situation that is the energetic duplicate of what you were doing. It is a magnification of those darker parts of soul that you have not really looked at, right? The ones that it's the final test for you to overcome. That is it in front of you. That's what you need to confront. The enemy is a physical embodiment of the thing inside of you, the darkest parts of you, that other piece of energy that you need to understand how to not control, right? But move into the flow of who you are, understand it, begin to use it properly in the proper nature, not to do harm, but to do good with it.
So what does that look like? Because it can be, I know in the Hero's Journey it talks about a test, allies, and enemies. So let's get into you're walking on the proper hero's journey. You're on the right road, and you're going through this initiation, and you hit a test in your life. Like, what does testing mean?
Well, it's a test, right? So, if you're going to step into a pool of water, you dip your toe in. You want to know what the temperature is.
Right.
So once you're there, it's like, okay, I got to test the water. I got to see what the comfort level is. I got to see what the risks are like as I move through here. Can I handle these risks? Am I willing to let all of this water overcome me at a different temperature and put me in a new medium that I'm not really used to? This final test, this enemy, is saying, are you willing now to embody the moment that you are in? You've initiated it.
Right.
You've stepped into the unknown world. Now this is the final embodiment. Okay?
So like with an enemy or a test or whatever, or even an ally that comes along, I think a lot of people look at their enemies, and I'm going to use a Christian word here, but a lot of people look at their enemies as Satan or, something that's going against them. It's not a blessing. Where actually Jesus talked about that, and he said, your curses can become your blessings. An enemy is a blessing in your life.
Because that enemy is teaching you the other part of you. Because we all know, all of our listeners, that everything is interconnected, right? We are all one.
Right.
So that enemy is that construct or that idea that we have of that opposing energy. So that opposing energy actually becomes your best ally. That becomes your highest teaching tool at that point. Because now you're really working with the final darkest parts of yourself, that amalgamation, that weird murky area that you never wanted to lurk in, and you really begin to learn. This is your hardest point of learning, is right here at this moment. It's with that enemy, that other force, and feeling that force inside of you and knowing how to use that force for a higher good, right? That's that catalyst that's going to move you forward, right? That's
so
the
I'm
thing.
looking at my enemy.
Yeah.
And I'm in this, and I'm looking at his initiation process, and I begin to look, and it's like, okay, I need this enemy out of my life to continue my hero's journey. So I'm looking at this person. Let's say it's a person at work. Yeah, because I want to get real practical here for a second. And this person at work is I would consider it like my sworn enemy. Like, this person hates my guts, wants nothing to do with me, and wants my demise. Like, would not be happier if I lost my job and my life went to ruin. Would celebrate that. So that's a true enemy. If they're willing to do ill will against you, willing to go against your free will, that's an enemy. And I get to see this person day in and day out. How do I let them teach me, and how do I learn from that?
Well, you're on a path, right? You're in a path of learning, as are they. But they haven't learned the self-awareness that you found yet. They haven't learned the balance or the ability to look at another person and share that energy and what they're going through within themselves. So what they're doing is they fight and project externally. So when you look at this person who might be a sworn enemy, realize that what they are doing is just that final catalyst to tell you or reconfirm what you already know. It should only strengthen the deepest truths of yourself and who you are, rather than break them down and ruin your foundation of what makes Jason Jason. Right? They are like, you should take what they have, that energy, and use it as the mortar to strengthen those walls, to continue to build and construct yourself further so that you really know the lattice, the build of who you are.
But I mean, like when I was talking about Conan the Barbarian, the old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and he had to go against his enemies. And it was like physical swords and stuff like that. Or you're watching Game of Thrones now. You haven't.
Oh my God. Please. I'm just getting started on
Alex is just getting started on the Game of Thrones.
I know it started in 2011 and in 2019, 8 years of series, but.
But when we see these enemies that come along, if we know that we're on the right journey, we have to expect enemies. If we see these enemies, then we have to look at that and say, it's a reinforcement that I'm on the right path, and it's a good thing.
That's exactly right. That's not a bad thing, because now that the enemy is a test, they're testing your true confirmation, that truth you really know about you, right? That you're so solidified in, no one can turn you away from that truth. You know better. I am not going to fall back. I'm not going to succumb to those bad habits, what has gone in the past, those old cycles that I used to live in.
Right.
I will not fall back to that. I have initiated myself into this unknown world. I have become uncomfortable. and I've tested this truth that I've found to be who I really am and what I was doing to put me on the right path, and I will continue to follow through on that path.
And you're going to see in Game of Thrones, I'm not giving anything away here. I won't do that to you. But the whole thing of Game of Thrones is Jon Snow's hero's journey.
Cool.
You're already seeing that on the first.
Yeah, I'm already
episode.
seeing that.
And you're going to see him fuck up.
Well, he was refusing. I was like, I don't want to go to the Night's Watch, and then he's there and he's being tested because his father dies, and he's like, I need to leave.
Right.
But you can't leave the Night's Watch.
Right.
So again, this is like another test for him, right? So like, where does he go? And at that point, or did he just fully accept what he's doing, which is what he's chosen to do, and move forward? And
where does his loyalty lie, with his family, or when he's sworn an oath? So now he's got. Oh man, this is so good right now. We're getting into something. How many times do we face in our hero's journey? How many times do we face two good things and we have to make a decision?
All the time. And the question is, do you choose the thing that is good, that is hard, or you choose what is easy? And I believe JFK said something around that, right? Do you choose the thing that is easy, or you choose it because it is hard? You choose the hard thing because you know it is the true right path. Even though the other one is easy to take and you can take it, the harder one will give you larger, greater benefits that will accrue to you and everyone else in the end.
Because I think that's so true, because a lot of people will just take, well, this is a good thing, and then they pick the easy one.
Yeah, but the easy one is not the right thing you really should be doing. It's taking that more effort, going through those tests, staying true to yourself. And that's what's great about the test part. Before you move in to, part 3, which is the unification of what you have learned, is within part 2, those tests really help you understand who you are, and they confirm it. They deep seat root that in your mind, your consciousness, and in your heart, and in your spirit. And you don't forget that feeling. And then you will never unwaver from those choices ever again when something easy comes up, when something simple, or seems like it's the less, catalytic path, or the one that will do the least amount of damage to you. It's like, no, that's not what I should be doing. I should go through the journey.
Right.
I should go through the trials and tribulations, because I know from what I've done, it has had larger payouts for me going forward.
Well, I think, and James talks about this in a couple other places in the Bible, they talk about it over and over again, that in the trials and tribulations is where you learn the most.
That is when you learn.
And you can see over and over again, whether you look at Moses, or you look at Jesus, or you look at Paul's, you can see the hero's journey playing out literally over and over and over again in the Bible. Because
the hero's journey is a mirror of the human spirit that we all go through. Is the oldest piece of our spirit evolving in our cycles of reincarnation. Because these are the catalysts, and the catalysts become harder and harder and harder over time, so that we learn these lessons and they become more rooted in who we are. We become more of that experience, so that when we review it, we truly know what our soul actually wants to be, and in our physicalness, we begin to embody that. And we'll show that in everything we do. We become the character, we become the creature of that habit.
And I have found in my enemies, that's where I've learned the most. Like that person, and I'm thinking of somebody even right now. I don't have a lot of enemies, but that person that I'm thinking about is basically a reflection of everything that I hate about myself. And so when I look at them in that way, then I'm like, how can I learn? Because I always see them as being the worst part of me. But it's really everything that I'm fearful in my ego, they're just displaying in front of me. And that's why I think I've considered them my enemy and despise them the most.
But you need to thank them.
Yes,
because now
exactly.
You're looking at them and you'll be like, thank you for showing me the thing that I continue to ignore day in, day out. The thing that I truly wouldn't face. But now that power, that energy that I was just like trying to hide and bury within me,
right?
You're forcing me to face it. That is my test.
That's why I think every day, whether we look at Hillary Clinton and all the issues that she faced, or we look at Trump, and all just the egotistical, narcissistic view, or you look at Hillary and all the behind the scenes secret, you're the American people, you don't deserve to know, I know better than you. Mm-hmm. And so we look at those two people and we'll get angry at either one, depending on what side we're on.
But you
and
do
we create
those
an
things.
enemy.
But don't you do those things?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And it's not a political format. We're not talking about like certain, like, I don't know, documents or whatever bullshit
I would love
they share
everyone
in
to
their
wear a
email.
higher density living hat.
Yeah.
And walk around and we have rallies and hundreds of thousands of people show up.
It'd be great. And guess what? We're there with our sworn enemies.
Yes.
And we're bonding with them, and people are thanking their enemies for what they have done. And the enemy does the same exact thing.
But don't you take the power away from it?
You totally dissolve that power.
Mm.
You eradicate it at that point by thanking them, loving them, and accepting them. You then start on the path of unification, which is the third part of the hero's journey, right? And that's the approach. You've now approached those enemies, right? You are where you're supposed to be. You know the final steps you have to take, and that is the pure acceptance. You're approaching that acceptance, right? And through that acceptance, you realize that the whole ordeal of everything you've been through was all worth it. It's these terrible stages, like when you're really trying to claw up to the light, when you're in this dark hole and you see the light and you're approaching the top of it.
Right.
This is the final part, and it's like you're wasted of energy. There's nothing left to you. You become vulnerable. You become truly vulnerable as a person. The unification, that understanding of that power and everything, you now have, it's not knowledge anymore. It's wisdom.
Mm.
Because you understand the truth and how to apply that truth properly to do a greater benefit.
I don't know if you saw the last Avengers movie.
I've seen them all. I cried during the last Avengers one.
Unification,
Yeah.
to me, is when Captain America was at the end. And he was old.
Oh. That was...
And he
that
redid
was,
his whole life with that girl.
That was cool. And so
the love of his life that
he went
always
through the
wanted.
other path. He took the other hero's journey and he ended up with what he truly wanted.
And he was, at the end of his life, old.
Sitting on the bench.
He's like, I would trade this 10,000 times.
Exactly. And having that reflection, that is the reward. And that's the final piece of part 3 of the unification. That's the transformation of the individual. That's the true solidification of that wisdom. You've now become the true self. You've let your spirit of who you are feel that sense of freedom. You've let it be what it truly wanted to be.
But he knows those enemies he faced and everything that he went up to brought him to that point.
It brought him to that
The
point.
worst enemies ever faced in his life led him to the point to where he could be able to go back and live the best life that he's always wanted
Precisely, because the hero's journey is set in cycles. So he did multiple parts of these journeys until it led him to his grand cycle where he realized, I need to go back and play what I truly wanted to follow. And he made that choice. And that's what it is. Do you accept the free will and the choice and the trials and tribulations, the thing that construct and mold and sculpt you into the beauty of what it means to be a human being? Do you accept those things? You don't fight them, you embrace them. You become a part of that journey. So those catalysts are no longer uncomfortable, but become normal. So your process of spiritual evolution is unstoppable. You become the unstoppable force within yourself. And then the beauty of that, that's when you move into the 4th part. And that's on the road back home.
I love that. Yeah. And on the road back home, the hero's return, the road back. And I just talked to a mountain climber and he said most injuries happen when you're descending.
You're tired at that point. The brain's cooked. You've been concentrating your foot placement when you're coming back down. So when I'm running back down from South Peak, I don't know, it's like 5-something miles, and you're hauling ass because your weight's carrying forward. If your foot placement's off, you'll snap your leg in half, you'll twist it, a branch will go right through your ribs, anything, you know? One wrong placement, and you're done. But you know that road back home. And so, where did he go with that? What did he explain?
No, he was just talking that because of the carelessness, or you're so caught up and you hit the summit and you're so done, you know, like you felt that, you know, you conquered that enemy or whatever. And in that complacency and in that not being, like fresh and being aware, that what in turn happens is that's when an accident happens. And that's what I kind of wanted to get into on the road back.
That's half the journey.
Yes.
Getting to the top was only half of your journey.
Yes.
Now that you've gotten there and you've acquired that wisdom and you're in that celebration, do not realize that you have to trace all of those steps back to where you came from. Because by tracing those steps back, you carry that wisdom back to that point, that original place of where you were, so that you can then share that wisdom. But if you not trace carefully, if you don't look back and reflect and learn on what happened, you find yourself hurt again. Because you're not applying that truth and that knowledge that you accumulated, that experience.
So how do we... So, you know, we've came out of part 3. We've got the approach, ordeal, reward. We're in part 4. We're heading to the road back. The hero's return. What is the learning process in the road back?
Well, the road back is your greatest review at that point. So you've encapsulated a life of experience. And now you need to know that I understand it from my perspective on this road back to where my comfortable life was. But I understand why it was comfortable, but also what I missed on, what was not really the truth or the true reality, what was the distortions in what I was living. So as I walk this road back, I can prepare and I can mull over these ideas, the experiences, and the wisdom I have so that I will know how to properly atone this knowledge and then share it with the people who I am closest with, your fellow man, so that you can spiritually uplift them and act as their catalyst. You be their call to adventure to move them out of that first phase of the ordinary world and then back into where they need to go, to put them on that cycle that they need to be in, move them out of that stagnant nature. So as we listen, for instance, on this podcast, and we learn something, we share that journey. This is us bringing that journey back home to you. And we call to you, as a catalyst, your call to adventure. Are you going to learn with us? Are you going to go on that journey? Are you going to test that unknown world? Are you going to unify all of those principles so that you can then go out and share it with more people? And as ideas continue to spread, they become a greater thing. And all it is just a parallel for how the physics of our universe works, how we interact with one another, our social circles. Everything is that hero's journey. It's that cyclicality of life. So that final stage is taking that wisdom, sharing it, and then actually doing that good with it.
So we get past the road back. And this one, I want us to kind of stay on this one because this is a biblical word. But I mean, I think it's a word older than that. And I'm going to look it up real quick because I want people to understand.
Oh, I think that's fair. Bring up the actual definition of it.
Because I want people to understand this word. On part 4, road back, hero's return.
Atonement.
Atonement.
Atonement. Atonement. That's correct. Spelling bee. Congratulations, you win.
Mm-hmm. So atonement, a reparation for a wrong or injury. In religious context, reparation or for sin, where there's like an annual ceremony of confession and atonement for sin. In Christian theology, atonement is really important because it talks about the reconciliation of God and humankind through Jesus Christ. So he atoned for your sins because you couldn't do it on your own, which we talked about fallacies of that. But he was the one that had to come in and atone for that. It would be the same as, we've watched all those movies. I'm remembering, I forgot the name of the movie, but Bruce Willis did that movie where he was in the jungle or whatever, and the people couldn't defend themselves. And so he had a SEAL team or whatever, and he made the decision to go, but we see that over and over again, whether it's the Western movie where all these gunslingers come in and they defend the innocent people. We see atonement played out over and over again. And in the movies, that's the whole thing. It's like, yes, we've got, the town hires these 5 sharpshooters, and then they're going to take the big cattle baron, because he's evil and coming in and raping our women and, or however it goes down. We see the movie Troy, and we see this whole idea of this hero atoning for innocent. What does atonement look like to you when you think of it in the hero's journey?
When I think of it in the hero's journey, if I'm bringing wisdom and I'm sharing it, it allows people to atone themselves. It allows them to feel that self-responsibility. I know that through my atonement, my reflection, what were the falsehoods and the bad choices that I have made. So I can reflect upon them properly now that I have that wisdom. And because of that reflection, I can share that non-dogmatic wisdom. I can share that higher form of truth with those people so they can atone themselves. They can learn, they can realize that I don't need to carry these weights or what I thought was a sin or what was wrong. Nobody needs to fix this for me. You've shared with me this wisdom and information. Now it is up to my discretion, my choice, my responsibility to clear myself of what I thought was the true reality when in truth it wasn't.
But I think that's the teach-learn aspect of it. When you look at, something like that, people see somebody doing something and then, like this sharpshooter comes in or whatever, this gunslinger, and then he gets the whole town riled up and then they're training the town. And then next thing you know, everybody around him has courage.
Yeah, but that's right. They were training the town, but they didn't give the town courage. They already had it there.
Yes, they already had it there.
Everybody already has everything they always need. It's a matter of stopping for a moment to find and reflect and take what you've learned and then bring that wellspring up within you, that creation of life, that courage, that feeling, that good feeling, and then use it to clear out that bad negative energy that doesn't need to be there. And again, it's a super small cycle of the hero's journey. You know, it's just a rendition of it in a smaller format amongst all these other people.
But I think when we look at atonement, a lot of times don't realize in this hero's journey, there may be a relationship that in the beginning maybe there was issues or whatever. I can picture this. Like I had a friend of mine. He was with this girl, fell in love with her. They fell in love with each other. Then family got involved. Lots of shit went down. Bad stuff was said. They break up. And then later down the road, they find out that his sister had said some bad stuff, some lies and all that stuff. And they get back together. You know, and that's kind of like what I see. And I'm trying to explain this because this atonement part is really important to me. And it resonates with me really big because I'm looking at me as a hero in this hero's journey, learning so much through the struggle that now I'm able to reconcile a relationship.
Absolutely. Because you realize you weren't able to reconcile them before because of a fear, attachment, creating the other, saying that someone was the enemy. That atonement is the realization that there was no true enemy ever. It was just another form of energy that I was dealing with. There was no other. They're also going through that same sort of path. I'm sharing that same thing with them. So that reconciliation, that is that bondage. So the unification you found in self now becomes a unification of the other also. So in the third phase of the hero's journey, when you're unifying the truths and the wisdom, you're now using that wisdom to now unify the group of all of us to show that there's unity between all of our creational journeys, our spiritual journeys, our spiritual evolution. That's what it is.
Yeah, because it's like somebody's seasoned in battle. It's like, okay, I've done this 100 times. Here we go.
Yes.
Compared to somebody that has never done it in the beginning and they're sitting there puking and scared shitless, you know, literally, and don't know what's going to happen, you know.
And then in the cycle, you become that mentor.
Yes.
Through that unification, that massive amount of love. And love is that wisdom of accepting and understanding of the other person, the other self. That is now the mentor. Now, by sharing that wisdom, you move them back in to the initiation of their journey. You are pushing them towards that point. And now you can stand there and hold their hand.
But I think it's more than being a mentor. When we look at atonement, there's universal truths that are happening. Not because when we look at the hero's journey, a lot of people go, and you talked about this earlier in our last episode, they make it all about themselves.
Yeah.
But the journey's not for you.
It was never for you. And that's an important part, and I'm glad you brought that up about the atonement. You've gone through this journey only to uplift the life and the spirit and the knowledge and the truths for everyone else around you that didn't have the ability to do so. And you should feel very fortunate through your self-awareness for what you have learned to go and share that story. Whether or not all of them listen, if you can change the mind of just one individual, you have doubled the power of that thought.
But isn't that why we like those movies where people are willing to give their whole selves for a greater cause?
That's why we love that. It's not even the...
It's like you just watched the first season
of
Game of Thrones. And Ned Stark.
Got his head lopped off by Joffrey.
Done. Over.
Yeah.
Piece of shit.
But
this dude is like... Everything inside of him is like, I fight for my family. I love my family.
I fight for honor and truth.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own wisdom, I cannot, out of my own good conscience, continue to say that this is how this should be. You know what I mean?
So he was willing to give himself up.
Yes.
And that's so we look at him as a hero.
That's the highest form of giving, is it not?
Yes.
Not that he was being a martyr. He wasn't expecting to get his head cut off. He was expecting to concede to the power of this child and understand that it's the darker part of what they are all doing. And he realized that that was inside of him. He really did. Ned Stark realized that. And he came to terms with that when he was sitting in that dungeon. And so when he came out and he said, oh, I should, after speaking with the eunuch, I should probably just reconcile and say that I am a traitor and I did do wrong, but only to that energy. He is speaking to that highest form of wisdom and truth and acceptance, and he stuck true to his true character.
And he gave his life, and what catalyst did that happen?
And that was a catalyst for Arya, Sansa, Cersei, Jon Snow. I got all the names. It feels so good. You know what I mean? And it
Dude, you're into this.
it drove all of these other characters.
And it's going to drive, that theme will drive through all of the seasons.
From the Lannisters to the Greylocks or whatever they're called. Like, I don't know. It's just awesome.
Because he becomes a legend. Why does he become a legend?
Why does he become a legend? Because what did he do? He took the journey that we all saw. He took that wisdom, and he stuck to that truth to the absolute bitter end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when someone is so true to themselves, you can never take that away from them. And I will, Jason, if you ever did something that you truly stuck to your guns, even if it was out to the demise of who you are, but you truly believed in it, I could never take that passion away from you. That is a truth. Right. That is a feeling. That is the highest creational growth within yourself that no one can ever take that experience away. And that is an amazing thing. And to find that sort of truth, that drive, that pure intuition that you are going to follow, what a beautiful thing. And some people never find it in their entire lives. And hopefully we use that, what is going on with other people and their experiences and their journeys, to then apply that back to our life. Hopefully that they see that as their catalyst. That catalyst for change, to put them on, take them out of their ordinary world, strip them from it, right? And then put them on the call to adventure through the refusal, so they can find their mentor, so they can cross those thresholds, they can test with their enemies, their trials, their tribulations, and they can unify the principles of their path so they can come home and share that same exact journey over and over again.
Yeah, and I can attest to this, and I want you to share a personal, but for me in this, even though it was a road back, and I want people to understand this, in this atonement process, it created another hero's journey.
That's what it does.
I didn't get to go back. I didn't get to be like, okay, I'm home now. The movie's ending. So here's what happened. And I know we've shared about this before, but I want to share this really quick because this is right. Pastor of a church, extremely successful, largest church plant in Washington State, in our denomination. They're asking me to speak all over, do conventions and stuff like that, doing that. Spoke at the national convention for our denomination. Poster boy of what I should be for their denomination, you know. Entrepreneurial, all that. You know, like I said, built a new building, did all that stuff. Something inside of me starts to hit. That I'm seeing all this religion as being false. But I just built this big complex of me setting myself up, and my family, my wife and 4 kids, setting myself up for comfort. I mean, I was making good money. It would only gotten bigger and bigger. I mean, that's what would happen. I would have been able to live in a comfort zone for the rest of my life and be known for having this. In fact, they had already told me, the denomination told me, you do this, this is what's going to happen next, this is what's going to happen next. You know, my whole future was set up for me in being a denomination leader, even making more money, the list goes on and on. I began to have this feeling inside of myself that I was teaching untruth to people. Wow. So I'm standing up there in front of hundreds of people at a pulpit, not being true to myself. And I was in the beginning stage, and I encourage, if people are in the beginning stage and you don't know, I mean, you know, I'm learning new stuff every day, but I began to resonate. So I decided to make decisions that were contrary to our denomination, contrary to the people that I was teaching. So we ended up losing the building. The denomination took that over. They ended up looking at me and saying, okay, you need to take a sabbatical or whatever and figure yourself out. In the meantime, here's what happens. In the meantime, I'm going through super bad issues because my ex-wife has made horrible decisions in this process. So now I lose my marriage, lose my family, lose all the comfort of the church, and I get to the point where I'm sleeping in my car homeless. How is that for a hero's journey? Just trying to be true to myself. That's where it got me?
That's where it got you. It got you to the deepest, darkest, murkiest part. And what happened when you were sleeping in the car? You were homeless.
I was homeless, and I decided to make a decision to attempt suicide. and I drove my vehicle. I mean, I've shared this before, but
Yeah.
I drove my vehicle into this big, deep river. And, somehow, miraculously, whether it was the intuition inside of me or whatever, the last thing I remember is water rushing into the vehicle and, being in the river and dove in there with my car to the point to where I'm laying on the beach in the middle of the night, freezing. So I don't know that whole process. I don't really care about that. But then from there, I had to pull myself up, because I was like, okay. But it's funny that I want people to realize this, especially with atonement. You can get to that point where you think your journey's over. And then in this moment where you decide to make a decision to lay down your life and sacrifice yourself. And I'm not talking about the suicide part. That was horrific. But
That's a side.
I'm talking about when you submit to what your gut really tells you, it could start you in the process all over again, even in deeper, darker, murkier water.
That's exactly right. It's
So-
what you truly needed to learn. Because, like I said,
I was on the end. I was at the. I
You
was
thought
in
you were on
comfort.
the-
I
you
was
thought
at-
you were in a great
I was on the road back. I'm atoning.
yeah, you're chilling. I got
People
a big
are getting
house.
saved. They're
Yeah.
accepting Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
I'm screaming dogmas in the pulpit. You know what I mean?
Yes,
I'm all
everything's
dressed
perfect.
up.
I got
Yeah.
suits on,
Life's good.
flying all over the United States.
And you thought that was the truth. But only until you got to the final, deepest, darkest parts of yourself. You faced the
Yes.
darkest part. You chose to quit life. You chose to quit experience.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what it is. You chose to quit. I don't need to do this anymore. That at that point when you chose to quit, that is when you are going to learn the most. And only from there have you come up. Have you then taken all those experiences and now you've applied it and you've become the true Jason you actually wanted to be. It was just so much pain that you were energetically releasing at one point.
Right.
You thought, I can only get rid of it by ending this existence rather than accepting the existence.
But isn't it funny now? I'm sitting here having the ability to speak truth through a platform that did not exist 10 years ago.
yes.
Or it did, but podcasting is blown up. And I'm able to and be able to meet with you at any moment, whenever we want, hop on some mics and share truth of things that we're learning and things that other people have taught us. And not be shackled with an organization, a denomination, before we would have to, just think about this, 15 years ago, could we have gone on mics in a radio studio?
No, not a chance.
Talk about
half
this.
the shit we say would not happening. There would be no continuity of thought, of theme, of emotion. We'd be constricted to what we say, how we say it, for how long, with the proper ad. Are you in the right station to be sharing that information? Something like
Do our
this.
sponsors like what we're saying?
It would never align.
No, it would never
Wouldn't work.
So the alignment is really important when it talks to atonement, because that part of you being true to yourself and then giving, because I think atonement really is the word giving.
Atonement is giving.
So when you're willing to give of yourself completely for the greater good or the greater cause, for that collective, and I don't know, and I want you to get into this part, that collective conscious, when you give with true intent
Yes.
and no ego, what is happening in the universe?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So, giving, if you measure the energetic signature of giving, what happens within the person and their body and their different levels, their actual auric body, you see that the giving resonates at such amplitude, at such coherent amplitude that it overcomes all the negative energies that can happen around it. There's such strength in the vibrational frequency, the resonance of what you are giving out as you begin to give. You open up that heart center, that chakra, that it will overcome that negativity, those bad energies. And so your ability to take that truth, that pure form of love and sharing and give it to other people will clear them of all of those energies and those ill thoughts and all those other forms as you move them up to that level of life and clarity and love that you have. And that giving allows them to feel that. It allows them to feel that energy, like you were listening to headphones for some musical piece, and it's like you took them off and you put it on a sad person so that they could feel and share in that same exact moment. So that giving is moving them into that vibrational zone. That's what it is. It's that transfer. And the consciousness, you already know what's going to happen. You've already made the conscious choice to give. So that openness of your body and your thoughts are more easily accepted in their amplitude, right? There's such coherence and laser-like focus on this is what I want to do will overcome the discontinuity of someone else's thought. So you help cohere their consciousness. And in that giving, that sharing of a moment, that gift of understanding, you combine those two consciousnesses together. They're both loving and focusing on one thing for that moment. There's a unification as a whole.
Because the intent that you're coming is pure.
The intent is so pure, and you bring them in with that pure intent. You're blending the consciousness, you're blending the energy of two. The vibrational frequency becomes one. It's no longer separate at that point. And that's what that atonement is in its purest form. It's that form of giving. Whether it be through that wisdom or something else or help. Just lending a helping hand.
So let's look at your life, Alex. So when you were, and I'm going to hit a touchy subject right now. So let's talk about debt. And we're going to do a whole hour podcast on this. So when we talk about debt and we talk about being burdened, and whether we want to look at it as an enemy or whatever, I mean, we create debt, by believing in these fallacies of what the American dream is.
Yeah.
That we have to have stuff, or we have to have these certain things. I need this Louis Vuitton purse, or I need these Gucci shoes, or, and so we just charge onto the credit card. When you want to, and I was watching a Jim Carrey thing and he was talking about this, when you want to, because he was at the epitome of, being a comedian and at the top, and now he's going through this whole process of withdrawing from all that and trying to understand his brain, When you look at debt and you look at yourself and the struggle with that, and then you look at atonement and understanding that, where was that process? Like the realization of it.
When I started to really feel what debt was, and like you said, it was
in a spiritual sense.
In a spiritual sense, debt was shackling. It was burdensome. It stripped me of my free will. It didn't allow me to find the choices or follow the choices that I truly wanted to follow, because debt carried a repercussion that would have greater detrimental effects to who I am or possibly my family by not following through on an agreed upon promise that I had made before.
So student loans, let's say.
So say it's a student loan, right?
So you're going to go look for a job so you can quickly pay off the student loans.
Yeah. So you're going to take something, whatever it is, because you're so worried about that cash flow. You might have studied, who knows what it was, some true passion while you were at school, or as people determine university. But you cannot follow through with those passions, what you truly want to do, because there's some other burden that you previously agreed to, some a heavier spiritual energy that strips you of your free will, saying you can't do that. You've made a choice to absorb this education and this debt and this massive burden, a self-inflicted burden.
Or the ordinary world.
Or the ordinary world. You cannot take these things and follow what's truly passionate to you, what defines who you really are, what you actually want to become. You can't
even do the call to adventure. You can't even start off on the
There's
road.
no call to adventure. It frankly, it halts, it arrests your entire life. It makes you stagnant. It puts you in a state of constant fear that if I don't work, if I don't stop myself from doing all of these things to service this debt that I've created, then I'm screwed. There's
debt becomes the master?
Debt then becomes the master at that point. You become subservient to it.
And now we've added dual incomes.
Yes.
So now we have two people that are monogamous in a relationship, creating children.
Yeah.
Depending solely, living paycheck to paycheck, buying homes, buying 2 cars. This is really a problem.
Yeah, and it's more than just a financial problem. It's a spiritual problem, because it prevents us from evolving. You can't test. You can't find those allies or enemies, because someone is determining the life path for you. You did make the choice to take on this debt, but you didn't have the wisdom ahead of time, nor did the people before you to warn you properly
Right.
of what you were doing, of that choice, going through their own hero's journey. That was not atoned and shared with you. So you perpetuated a cycle of just servitude to this thing.
So the American dream is the biggest deterrent to taking the hero journey.
It stops you from taking the hero's journey.
Because it's imposing on your free will.
It imposes on the free
Dude, that's
will.
so fucking good.
And it says that you need to measure yourself and compare yourself to others, but there is no learning. It's all about...
How do you compare yourself to somebody else's journey? You can't.
You can't. It's all separate. But you'll never begin to learn. You'll never be able to start because you were halted the moment this debt came in and said, guess what? Your choices are up.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't service this, we're going to strip every asset that you thought you owned and we're going to take it all away. So every attachment that you put yourself to, we're going to rip those things away from your life. We're going to put a mark on your credit, right? So anybody that comes to say, is this person trustworthy? They're going to say no. All because of what? Because I couldn't pay $1 back? That's going to determine who I am as an individual?
For years and years
For
and years.
And it doesn't go away, and it's just a terrible, exclusive system that benefits the few and harms the many. So it's important that you understand that your hero's journey cannot be begun until you get rid of this false master. Is the best way I would describe it.
So, and I don't want to get into debt because we're going to do a whole podcast on that. But when we're looking at the hero's journey, we're looking at this whole process because we're 45 minutes into this. So how do we free ourselves up to take the call to adventure? I know getting out of debt would be one.
Yeah.
For people that are out there
Well,
listening.
we can put that to the side, right? But how do we go to the call of adventure? It's a call. And what is required of a call? To recognize that there is one, you have to listen. And that's taking that moment to listen to yourself or the catalysts that are around you. Do not ignore them. That is the first palpable, tangible step you can take right now in your life, is to listen. And I'm not talking about the audio, but truly pay attention to what's going on around you.
And then what your gut is telling you.
What your gut is telling you. And let it speak to you. Do not fight it. And when something comes up and you're like, wow, that's kind of awkward, well, go with the awkward. Because the awkward's right. Follow that awkwardness.
The awkward is there because you're imposing fear on it.
You're putting fear on it. So you're saying, ew, that thing's strange. I don't want to mess around with it. I don't even want to look at it.
So let's say you look at this and you're like, okay, I have my calling. I know I want to be, I got an MBA and I'm sitting there and I'm in a job that I hate doing finances. My real calling is working with horses and being a veterinarian and being out there.
Okay.
But I've got all this debt. So now it's time. Now it's time to make, I don't want to say goals, but to make these hard decisions that says, I may not be able to mess with horses today, but I know if I can get my free will back through these processes, and it may take me a year, 3 years, 5 years of sacrificing, but this is my end goal.
You got to make the choice. Don't look at the goals. You need to make a choice now. Because if you don't make it now, you will make it never. You will always sit and reside in fear in this world of comfort that is actually killing you. That is not having you learn. So that you can go through this life and then end it so that you can come back another one just to learn those lessons all over again. So let me ask you, are you going to stand here and make the choice now? Or are you just going to wait for the cycle to repeat itself over and over and over until the catalyst is so strong that you cannot refuse it?
Are you going to be a Ned Stark or a coward?
You'd be a Ned Stark or a coward. That's exactly right.
So I want to get into, we just have a few minutes left, but the last one is the return. It's the part 4, the road back, the hero's return. So we return. In a return, there's celebration.
There is. Do you remember in the first Lord of the Rings? The Hobbit comes back.
Right.
After a long journey. Or I guess it would be the third one. They finally return home to the Shire. And everyone is there, and they're in their normal life. The guy's there. He's raking his plants. He's still pissed off with,
Yes.
Sam Wise, or I forget what his name is.
He doesn't know. Yeah.
And he doesn't
He's been
know
there the whole time.
He's been there the whole time. There's been no catalyst for his change. But the perspective that Samwise Gamgee has, now I remember, I feel so happy, is when he looks at him, he can understand the disgruntledness of this individual. He can understand his personality better. And then when they go inside the journey, that book, The Hobbit's journey, is finally finished. He can close that tomb, write the final sentences, close that over, right? End that chapter and move on to the next part of the cycle. And they have that celebration. Everyone's happy that they returned home.
But the hero, and I want people to understand this, in that celebration, the hero, like in that, I'm envisioning that moment, but he's looking at it with complete understanding.
No ego.
Yes, because the ego would be, don't you people realize what I did for you?
Yeah, that would be the ego.
All you guys would be all fucked up and all dead if it wasn't for me.
Exactly. But none of that is said.
Mm-mm.
None of that is shared.
Because a true return.
Oh, you're good. Go for it.
No. I'm just teeing you up. A true return is this ability to be able to look at others in your sacrifice with love.
That's all it is. Every single other person with love is that beautiful sense of understanding. It's the people that were living in that ordinary world with you. And you're like, that guy's my enemy. That guy's a problem. I hate this guy. I'm pissed off here. This, that, and then the other.
But we love that innocence. You know, like you could be pissed off from work and had the worst day and you come home and you look at your child and they're playing with Legos.
Yeah.
And they're like, I love you, Daddy. In that moment, they had no fucking idea what you just went through.
No, they have no clue. And neither do any of those people when you return.
Yes.
So do you just tell them what you've been through? Do you say, I've done all this?
Don't you understand? Do you tell a little kid that?
Yeah.
Like, why are you happy? Don't you realize what Dad just went through so you can play, so I could buy you Legos?
And what good is that? What will that do?
What
Nothing.
does it do to the child?
Because that is the ego speaking.
Mm-hmm.
The true return would be speaking to the wisdom, is embodying that innocence and where they are and sharing your perspective non-egotistically.
And I love, you know, and we can get into whether it's Buddha or Jesus, whatever, but I always go to that. The return is when Jesus was on the cross and he looked at everyone, you know, being who he was.
Yeah.
And said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
For they know what they do.
He's looking at them and saying, I'm laying my life down for you to this point to understand the completion of the return.
You're not wrong for
Right.
where you are standing observing this. You just don't know any better.
Yeah, and it's like when in the end of 300,
Yeah.
and he sends the guy back, and the guy doesn't want to go back.
The one with
He's
the
like,
one
he
eye.
wants- yeah, he wants to die with them.
Yeah.
And he comes back and he talks to his wife, you know, and they're in that field, you know, that's like a wheat field or whatever. But he realized in that moment the importance of him returning and what that meant.
And sharing the wisdom of what had happened
Mm-hmm.
with all of those other people so that they can understand the story and the journey and how that led him to learn to get to that point. So that then he could amass more people to follow and they could all learn in this point. And then they could coalesce with one another. Because
if he didn't if that guy would have died in the battlefield, the guy with the one eye, he wouldn't have been able to come back and be the true leader and lead those people to the point to where they needed to be.
And again, in that movie, it's the hero's journey. Somebody had to return.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the completion of it. It was the transfer of that wisdom, that highest form of truth, to unify people and uplift them all. And that's what it is. That's hero's journey. And we live that journey, Jason, every single day.
Yeah, we do. And I you know, and I'm really appreciative of these stories that we can pull, whether it's from movies or whether it's from books or whatever. I'm always reminded of the story of Jonah. I don't know if you know that one.
Jonah and the whale?
Jonah and the whale, yeah, where he fought going to Nineveh. There was this place that, God had called him to go help these people. And so then a big whale came, and he was in the belly of the whale for, 3 days, 3 nights. It was a representation of Jesus being in the tomb for 3 days, 3 nights. There's a lot of correlations with that. But then the whale spits him out right where he's supposed to be at. Then he goes back, he goes there, helps save all the people. Then right at the end, the whole town's good, everything's good. He goes beneath a tree and he wishes that he could die. He just did amazing work. The return has happened. And he's sitting there. And I've seen this with heroes. And this is what I want to talk about real quickly. And then we'll end on you. That level of everybody celebrating all around him. And the hero's just sitting there like, just not feeling it, depressed.
Yeah, what are you truly celebrating?
Yeah, they don't know, and it's like the kid that's just smiling at you saying, "I love you, Daddy."
Yeah, they don't know truly what they're celebrating. Or even more so, people that, do certain protests or speak about things politically or say something that is, rather crass to someone that they love. They just didn't know any better.
Mm-mm.
And they were in a form of celebration, positive or negative, and they were just embodying that energy, but they hadn't been through that journey for themselves to truly understand what was going on, to realize that there was a better action or course they could have taken.
I think it's almost in the return their sadness because it's over.
Yeah.
And our true selves know that we learn the most in the journey.
Yeah.
So now there may be a break, but we need to listen to that next calling.
And what's the next one? And that's what it is. Now that you've gone through that experience, where's your next step? Sit there and listen in patience. Don't be sorrowful. Just love the fact that you've gone through this and it could be shared with all these people and you can unify them even in your own perspective. The unification of people in your own perspective is strong enough, even if they don't choose to be unified. That does enough good to the global consciousness of all of us as a whole. So then listen for that next journey, because it's going to come, because none of us are done learning.
No, exactly. Well, thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. That was awesome.
Thank you, Jason.